program, Zev Brenner. We have with us right now Mark Trencher, the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community, both on a communal, organizational level, looks at the Orthodox world with the Charedi, modern Orthodox. He's a Musmach of Rabbi Jacob Joseph Rabbinical Seminary, a past president of an Orthodox shul, a day school and kashrut organization on the board of directors of National Council Young Israel. Professionally, he was a business executive for 40 plus years, who headed the research departments at two Fortune 200 financial firms, and has taught undergraduate and graduate business statistic courses at 3 universities. He has a popular podcast which explores the issues of importance to the Orthodox Jewish community. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ev. It's a pleasure being here with you.
A pleasure to have you. So tell us, what made you decide after a successful career in business to get involved in research of the Orthodox Jewish community? And go ahead.
Okay, so I worked in research a lot of the time, and I was also very involved in the Jewish community. We used to sit around at board meetings of my shul or the day school, and we'd say to ourselves, what do the parents want? What do the kids want? What do the membership want? And it always occurred to me that we never really went out and asked them what they want. So I decided when I retired in 2015, I decided to take my research background and offer 2 things to the Jewish community. One, I've done 14 very broad communal surveys that are available free of charge to everybody who wants to read them. And then I do surveys of a shul or a school or a business or etc. wants a research project in the Jewish community. I offer that as well. So that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. It's been a lot of fun.
So let me ask this. Part of your studies have been showing why people leave, whether it's the modern Orthodox community, the Haredi community, the Yeshivish community. So what have you found in your research?
Yeah, so actually the first study I did when I first started thinking about doing this back in 2016, at that time there were a lot of books out there like Unorthodox, etc. There was a Netflix show. There was a lot of talk about why people leave Orthodoxy. And if you went to the Aguda convention or to other convention, people would give presentations on how to address the problem of at-risk kids. I decided, let me try to actually go out and get together a group of people who've left Orthodoxy, modern, Hasidish, Yeshivish, and ask them straight up, tell us in your own words why you left. And my goal was to get maybe 200 or 300 people. I ended up getting 885 people responded to my survey. 885. It was kind of amazing. I realized then a couple of things. One, that when you go to a group of people that have not really been probed for their views, and you ask them, so what do you think about something? People are very, very interested in the Jewish community and expressing themselves. So we did ask these 885 people why they left Orthodoxy, and it was very interesting. So the interesting thing was that the top reason, actually, there were 2 reasons. One was, so for a lot of people, there's just a certain kind of person who's questioning and probing and asks questions. And we heard over and over again, young people said, you know what, I had questions. I picked up a science book, whether it's evolution, whether it's the age of the universe, whether it's this or that, biblical criticism, whatever. But I had questions. So I couldn't ask the questions. There was nobody who really wanted to hear the questions. If I asked the question, people would say to me, it's a klutz kasha, dumb question, go away, leave me alone. So it occurred to me, over time, I became frustrated by not being able to get answers to my questions, which I thought were legitimate. And so over a period of a few years, I gradually kind of lost my emunah, my faith, and in the end, I drifted away. So that was one of the reasons people gave.
Now, was that true of the modern Orthodox and the Haredi community? Was that the same factors, or was it more one group?
It was true. It was true of both groups. There were some differences. There were differences between men and women. Among modern Orthodox women, a lot of them said, they really didn't like the limited role that they could have. That was only true among modern Orthodox. That was not really true among the Charedi. But the issue of a certain type of personality who asks tough questions and is looking for sophisticated answers, even when you're 14 or 15 or 16 years old, these kids are pretty smart and they're able to kind of have some understanding. So that the conflicting, the fact that they became aware of things that conflicted with what they had learned in yeshiva or in day school, the fact that they were thinking about issues and they couldn't get answers. That was an issue among the Charedi and among the modern Orthodox.
Now,
I
what
mean,
age
there
levels are
were
we
some areas
talking
that,
about? Are these high school kids, college
yeah,
age kids? What age range are we looking at?
okay. So we spoke to people of all ages who grew up Orthodox and were no longer Orthodox. They were a median, on average, they were in their on average, the time when they left Orthodoxy was in their early 20s, but some of them were in their 30s and 40s and were remembering back 10 or 15 years. So they were actually people ages 18 and older who were no longer identified as Orthodox. I should tell you, one thing that I found interesting was we had over 50 different reasons that people gave why they left, why they went off the derech, and I divided them into two groups. Group one is something in the outside world attracted them. They were lured out. They were pulled out of our frum community by something
Like
from the outside world.
social
The other
media,
fact,
like social media.
yeah, social media, the internet, popular culture, whatever it was. The other factor was something in the community. There was something that happened to them within the community that they didn't like, they couldn't tolerate, that pushed them out. So, for example, seeing somebody, for a kid, they see somebody, an incidence of sexual abuse, for example. Not that it isn't that was what pushed them out, but then they see a person not being charged appropriately, or they see, sometimes you see it being quieted over, or you see a person who committed some type of white collar crimes being honored. So for a kid, this caused them to say, I don't like this. Why can't we do a better job within our community? I think it's good news, because we can't change the world. The Orthodox community really can't. We can't change the outside world. We're very small in the big scope of things, but certainly we can address issues within our community. A survey I did just recently, we asked people what is the most important issue that you think our community must face over the next 10 years. And all three groups of Hasidish, Yeshivish, and modern Orthodox, they all said the cost of education. But for the Hasidish, the number one issue that they raised was addressing the incidences of sexual abuse in the community. That was when I asked that question 6 years earlier. It was way down the bottom of the list. But somehow, for reasons, and I think we were all aware of some of the events that have taken place, that became an important issue. So that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that if the community does a better job addressing the issue, then the people are not going to have criticisms. A kid who might leave the community because they're unhappy about how it's being addressed would now say, okay, we're taking steps. It's a good thing. So we can take steps to address issues in our community. That would definitely.
So what
help
you're saying
in
now, the
off
issues
the
of
derech
sexual
situation.
abuse has risen from 6 years ago, where it was near the bottom of the list, where it's now the top of the list in the Hasidic community as far as reasons why people are leaving.
It's not the incidence of it. It's the dealing with it. It's dealing with it, and the dealing with it was, when we asked in 2017, is sexual abuse a problem? It was towards the bottom of the list. When we asked it more recently, and the wording was, dealing with perpetrators of sexual abuse, it rose up to very high at the top of the list. So there are issues that become more important over time, and the lesson for the community is to deal with issues.
Now, how is the community dealing with? Have you done any polling as to how the community is dealing with people go off the derech? It used to be where they threw the kids out of the house. I think that's changing. Where leading Rabbanim is saying, don't throw them out, show them love, bring them in. Have you explored those changes as well?
To some extent, but you're absolutely right, Zev. I mean, the issue of sitting shiva for a child who intermarries, that's kind of, today there's a more of a sophisticated attitude of, I don't want to call it unconditional love, but acceptance and keeping them within the fold. And you never know what's going to be. You never know what's going to be in the future. A kid might have an experience that causes them to return. So that we haven't followed up on that 2016 study. But I will tell you this: in that survey, we asked people, "How is your the people who left the Ortho and Orthodox? We asked them, how is your relationship with your father, with your mother, with your siblings?" And we did find, and we tracked it over time, because we looked at people who went off the derech just a few at that time versus 5 years earlier versus 10 years earlier. And we did find that, for example, the acceptance of people at the time when people went off the derech, the acceptance, they accept me, they accept my decision, was in the 20% range, very low. But after 10 years, it went up to the 50%. So after 10 years, 50% of them say, yeah, you know what? They accept me. They don't understand fully why I did what I did, but I'm part of the family, and a big part of, so that there is over time. Time does to some extent heal the wounds. And the one thing we also found in that survey of people who went off the derech is they really still feel strongly connected as Jew. They don't identify as Orthodox, conservative, reform, or any of the labels. They call themselves, I'm just Jewish, traditional, I'm just Jewish. So they still love being Jewish. They many of them have a Friday night, have a Shabbos dinner, Friday night. They love Zmira, singing. Some of them still keep kosher at various levels, and they have various levels of emunah and belief in Hashem. So in their heart, the Pintel Yid, the little spark of Judaism, does live on in some form. And so the community, instead of the attitude being to basically ignore them, I think more and more the attitude is, we don't understand why you did what you did, but you're still part of our mishpacha, it's still part of our family.
I think the Moshe Feinstein of blessed memory is reported to have said, somebody asked him, should he sit Shiva on somebody the son was marrying out of the faith? And he said, basically speaking, that if he said Shiva, he can't bring him back to life. So,
right.
And I think maybe more and more people are taking that hard today. I think there's the difference in dealing with the situation, and I think your polling will show 50 from 20 to 50%. That's a nice increase, and hopefully that will increase even more in your next study, because it is a crisis we're having, and I think it affects almost every community, whether it's yeshivas, Hasidish, modern Orthodox. You have to deal with it at different levels in different ways.
Right. And you mentioned the next study. The thing people say to me over and over again is, I've done 14 studies, but they've all been among adults age 18 and older. And everyone keeps saying, these high school kids, high schools today are not like what they were when I went to high school in the 1960s. It's a very challenging time in society. So our next survey, I hope, will be among Orthodox. It'll probably be mainly modern Orthodox. I mean, I think they might be easier to reach, but what are the lives of high school, of Jewish Orthodox high school kids like, in terms of the challenges that they face in these difficult times? So
now,
that may well be a survey next year.
But how do you do your survey? Is it they volunteer the information to you? Do you call them, send them emails, letters? How do you call this information?
Right. It's mainly done by emails. Several organizations, the RCA, the National Council of Young Israel, other organizations and rabbis have been very helpful. Some of the surveys I've done early on, I would basically send an announcement to, like, the RCA, we're doing a broad survey of the Jewish community, and they passed it on to their rabbis, and the rabbis passed it on through their newsletters or through announcements. And we got the survey we did in 2017 of the modern Orthodox community. We got 6,000 responses online. So we've been doing it that way. I've been doing it, as you know, through email blasts. There are, one of the nice things about the Orthodox community is we have a lot of these email blast capabilities through shows like your own, through the various newspapers. So we have no difficulty reaching people. I've done a couple of surveys differently. I did one Yiddish language survey, which we had to float through some creative methods. I also did a survey in Lakewood for a business that had a paper survey, but it's all done online. But there's one thing I have to admit to you. And that is that a big challenge of doing research in the Orthodox community is that as you move from left to center to right, people are a little bit less willing or interested to participate in surveys. So for example, somebody who's more yeshivish would view, why do I need to participate in a survey for? It's batala, it's taking away time from Torah learning. So to some extent, I have to adjust for that. So I do tend to get more people in the modern right, modern center, modern left, and then it tapers off a little bit as you move into the yeshivish. But I get good responses, even in the Hasidish world. I did a survey for Hatzalah, and we got 2,000 Hasidim responded to an online English language survey, including 400, if you can believe it, 490 Satmar Hasidim responded in English to an online survey. And people say to me, yeah, they have internet access. Yes, it's more men than women, but they have access.
Have you done a survey as to how many in the Hasidic? Have you done a research how many from the Hasidic community use the internet? Because there is a reluctance in some circles to even do the internet.
Yeah, we haven't asked them that, but when I do a survey and I send out a link, so for example, I'm doing a survey now, and my email is always in the invitation, and I've gotten on the survey I'm doing now, which is about politics, if you can believe it. I've gotten 2,300 responses, and I've gotten so far 6 people have contacted me that their filter, because they take it on a phone, their filter is not letting them get in, or they have a problem. So I think that the belief that nobody's on the internet is not true. Yes, there are some that are not on the internet, but somehow, and the guys fill it out at work, often through a work computer. So I mean, there's no doubt that there are people who are off the grid and are not on the internet. But I think what we're hearing is that the percentage is not very large.
We're speaking with Mark Trencher, the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community, both communally and organizational wise. And we'll look at some more of the issues that really we're confronting with. To reach us, you can call us at 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. Email is a wonderful way to have your questions answered, zev@talklinenetwork.com. By the way, keep the emails coming for Tuscanini grape juice, getting a very nice response. If you want to win a 3-pack delivered to your home, courtesy of Keiko, just give us your name, address, and zip code. The same email, zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. We're going to be right back.
Please
You're
welcome
listening
the
to
110th mayor of the great city.
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Mark Trencher is our guest, the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community. And of course, we're looking at trends. Let's go to our first phone call. Let's go to Stan in Kew Gardens. So Stan, welcome to the program. Forest Hills. I'm moving you to a more Jewish neighborhood. You're going to move to a more Jewish neighborhood, Stan.
Wait a minute. There's a lot of synagogues here. More coming, seriously. But anyway, as you know, sir, being a Pole, there is tremendous anti-Semitism in New York and in the country to some major extent. And most of the liberal and conservative and reformed and constructionists are not leaving the United States. Have you done any survey about Orthodox moving or leaving? Many do, but do you know any numbers of are leaving the United States for Israel? Or in the future, have you done any survey in that regard?
Good question.
So I haven't done
Thank
any
you.
surveys. I haven't done any surveys. I have seen statistics that show that approximately 3,000 American Orthodox Jews annually make Aliyah. They do tend to be primarily modern Orthodox, and based upon the number of modern Orthodox Jews in this country, it's a little bit less than 1% of American modern Orthodox Jews making Aliyah.
Is that every year?
Every year. So
Is that every year?
Yeah, every year.
It's been a pretty much of a trend. So that means after 10 years, you'd have 10%. You know, we asked one of our surveys, we asked the question about, are they, so for example, in the modern Orthodox day schools where we rely on Orthodox teachers, are there issues with the decrease in the number of available people to teach? And people have said, yeah, there is, because to some extent the community is hemorrhaging people. It is a small, slow trickle. We did a survey recently in which we asked people who made Aliyah why they did so, and I can tell you we had a whole list of reasons, but the basic reasons were ideological. It's our homeland, our people, love of Israel. You know, things like the cost of education were on the list, but they were lower down. So that does seem to be a trend.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Was it broken down into, are there older people more going or younger people? How is it broken down to some extent?
We haven't looked at it. We do ask in our surveys. We always ask how old you are. The people who respond to the surveys. Right. I mean, my impression is that it's younger people. It may be both. I mean, I've spoken to people who told me it's wonderful to retire in Israel on American Social Security or a pension because it's easy because life is easy. But it seems to me from the people I know, it's a lot of people with kids who are looking for just to make a change in their lives.
Quick, something you said interested me. They consider it their homeland, not their religious. These are Americans born here, Orthodox, who are going there. They consider it their homeland or their religious homeland?
Well, both. It's their religious. It's our people. It's the Jewish people. It's the Jewish homeland. You know, we asked in the survey.
Right, exactly. But you said homeland. That's why I was just. It interested me. You know, basically that was the reason.
In the survey we're doing now, which hasn't come out yet, but I just looked at that, we have so far 2,300 responses. We asked Hasidim and Yeshivish and modern Orthodox, do you view yourself as an American? And the percentage among modern Orthodox is pretty high. Among the Charedi, it's quite a bit lower. It's about 30 percentage points lower. I don't have the exact numbers, but to some extent they view themselves as in Gullus. You know, they're in exile. And but nonetheless, it seems to it's the modern Orthodox who more often make Aliyah. So there's a very strong connection to Israel. There's a stronger emotional connection to Israel among most American modern Orthodox Jews than there is a connection I mean, a lot of them feel connected to America, to democracy, you know, to what America offers us as a land, you know, as a Malchus Shel Chesed, a land of kindness. But there's a strong pull. There's a strong ideological pull. That's what gets people to move to
What
Israel.
about voting? What about voting? Have you heard done anything about the next election?
That's what we're going to be
Yes.
talking about, the polling.
Oh, okay. I'm
So,
sorry.
but Stanley asked some good questions. Are you making Aliyah? And if you do, are you going to call us from Israel?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, Stanley, are you going to be making Aliyah? And if you do, are you going to be calling us from Israel?
No, to be perfectly honest, I like exactly the home I'm in. It's called the United States. This is my country.
All right, it's our country, but you can be American citizen and also love Israel.
my religious home is Israel, but I'm an American citizen. This is my home.
Stanley, thank you for calling from your home to our home.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So he mentioned politics. So what politically? Because I know that, especially in the last election, there have been surveys that have shown that the majority of the Orthodox Jewish vote went for Donald Trump. I would like to know, if you're doing polling now, what you're finding. Is that change? Is there a difference between the Charedi community and the mono-Orthodox when it comes to that?
Yeah. So the bottom line, if you merge together all of the Orthodox, what you said is true. There's a majority was for Donald Trump. So what we went in the survey that we're doing now, we asked people, who did you vote for in 2020, 2016? But we're also asking people, how do you plan to vote in 2024? Definitely Republican, probably Republican, definitely Democrat, probably Democrat. Understanding that the candidates are not 100% locked in yet. In the Charedi community, which is all of the Hasidish and Yeshivish combined, Trump gets close to 90%, in the high 80s. Not Trump, the Republican. The ones that say definitely or probably Republican are about 88%.
But would that include Donald Trump?
Whoever it is. We just said, how do you plan to vote in 2024? Are you going to vote? The wording was something like, although the candidates have not yet been nominated, at this time, what is your intention in terms of voting in 2024? Is it so definitely Republican or probably Republican? Those two together, among the Charedi, about 88% said yeah, Republican, and the other 12%. No, I'm excluding those who say undecided. There's a few who say undecided. In the modern Orthodox, it's much closer to 50-50. In all of the modern and centrist combined, it's much closer to 50-50. In fact, it's a little bit swings towards definitely or probably Democrat at this time.
And is that the same of the last election? Because I was under the impression that there was almost, whether it's Haredi and the minor Orthodox, that Donald Trump did very well in all segments. So you're saying
so then
that
if you
it's
combine
changed?
them, yeah. Well, if you combine the Charedi, the thing you have to realize is that if you look at all of American Orthodox Jewry, the modern Orthodox are only about 35%. The Charedi make up 65%. So you take the Charedi, 65% of the group, and the fact that they're voting 88% Republican, and that's why when you look at all of Orthodox Jewry, it's definitely swings strongly to towards the Republican. But this is there's still a long way to go. There's still 15% across the board said undecided. I mean, people are still waiting to see what happens, and whether in fact Trump will be the nominee, whether in fact Biden will be the nominee. I mean, he seems to want it, but politics is funny, right? We've all seen crazy things happen in the past, and we still have over a year to go.
Now, I'm curious. Now, you mentioned these will vote Republican. Do we have any statistics on how many Orthodox Jews in either camp are actually registered Republican? There's been a movement to actually become part of the Republican Party. I'm wondering if that's reflected not just in voting, but in actual membership.
Well, we don't ask about actual membership, but we ask them what their voting preferences are. Which of these, Democrat, Republican, Independent, other. One of the choices is, I'm not really politically oriented. I don't really have a political connection. So those numbers, the fact that among the Charedi, a very high percentage identify as being Republican. They view themselves as Republican voters. And the same thing is true among the modern Orthodox. They have a much closer to 50-50 split, much closer to 50-50.
Now,
That's it.
and number-wise, the Haredi community, of course, is very large. You mentioned 65% versus 35% modern Orthodox. Is the modern Orthodox community shrinking? and the Charedi community growing? Are the numbers holding their own? Can you give us an
Yeah.
idea?
Sure. So the modern Orthodox is not shrinking, but it's not growing. It's been pretty flat. It's around 350,000 people in America are modern Orthodox Jews, and about 550 or 600,000 Charedi Jews. That second group, the Charedi, they are growing very rapidly because they have an average. The Hasidim have an average of between 6 and 7 children per family, and the Yeshivish have an average between 5 and 6 children per family. And with today's health, in the old days, if you look at some of these firms, if you look at some of these books that tell you about the rabbis of the past, they would say Rabbi so-and-so had 11 kids, and 3 of them survived into adulthood. But today, when you have 8 kids, they're all surviving and getting married, and people are making chasanas, and they're having children. So, if at a 3.5% annual growth rate in the Hasidic world, which I've seen, you have that community doubling in 20 years. So in 20 years, the Charedi 650,000 will be well over 1 million, and it looks in the modern Orthodox will probably be close to what it is now, close to 300,000. So
How many children are the modern Orthodox having on average?
On average, 2.5, 2 to 3.
Now, the big reason why, and I've heard this more in the modern Orthodox community than the Haredi community, they say tuition is a form of birth control. And I know that you've heard that expression, right?
I've heard it. And in a survey we did last year, one of the questions we asked is, do you do any family planning? And if so, and not a lot of them, many admitted that they do family planning, but the percentage that said they do it because of the cost of education was actually not that high. So maybe people didn't want to admit it, but
let's talk about tuition. Yeah. Tuition is certainly now it's much higher in the modern Orthodox community than the Haredi. Even though the truth is, if you have 8 kids or 10 kids, you're paying tuition. Even if it's a low tuition, it comes out to come out the same as maybe a modern Orthodox parent who has 3 kids and going to school.
Right.
But let's talk tuition. How big of a factor is that in the polling that you've done?
Yeah, so we did it. We did a survey. One of our most popular surveys was the cost of Orthodox life, where we went through everything. What do you spend on, obviously, day school, yeshiva tuitions, but also what do you spend on tzedakah, charity? What do you spend on shul membership? And day to day, the cost of kosher food. What do you spend on that? Matzahs, shmura matzahs, the arba minim, lulav and esrog, etc. And it was on average, the average family that responded to our survey was spending about $30,000 a year out of pocket on day school education, which is kind of high. What was most interesting about that survey, though, was at the end of the survey, after people had gone through a very, very long, after people had gone through a 15-minute survey, and by that time they were probably very frazzled, having gone through all of their expenses. We then asked at the very end of the survey, so we asked, bottom line, is it worth it? Is what you're spending to live an Orthodox life worth it overall? And to my surprise, and I was very pleased to see that the vast majority said, you know what, it's totally worth it. I wouldn't want to live any other life. About 85% of modern Orthodox said that. About 95% of the yeshivish people said it. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, I have a lot of kids. I have to make 5 weddings. I have to make 3 bar mitzvahs. I'm paying tuitions, and I'm going to be paying to support my kids even after they get married. But it's worth it. It's totally worth it. So when people ask me sometimes what's my favorite question, I point to that, because it was just interesting to see that response after people had gone through the entire litany of what they're spending money on, that they still have that positive attitude. So
you mentioned 30,000 for tuition. Is that in the Haredi and modern Orthodox the same? Is it the numbers different tuition? I'm curious what the numbers are.
No, I recall it was a little bit lower in the Haredi world, closer to 20,000. But again, they have more children, but with the tuitions per school, I should mention that the surveys are. The full reports of all these 13 surveys are all available online at nishmaresearch.com. Nishma as a Nasav and Nishma, not Nishma we listen. There's no dots, it's just Nishma, Nishma research.com. And they could look at the report of Off the Derech, the report of Baalei Teshuva, the report of finances. Everything is available online. The other thing I would say is, we talked earlier about the methodology, about online surveys. Another question is, where do the questions come from that I ask? And I'm very pleased to tell you that all of the questions come from the community. I solicit questions. What do people want to know? I always get people from the community involved. So basically, what I'm trying to do is answer the questions that are on the mind of the community, and then to make it available to everybody to read. So the survey on finances is one of those surveys that people can get online, and you can download it and print it and enjoy it.
But here's the question. If it's only people sending online, is it a little bit skewered because maybe people have an agenda when they're responding to you? Some of the other surveys that are done, don't they also do a combination of online, but they may be cold calling people or doing some other things that will give them a broader consensus?
That's a good question. So I'll give you an example. A Pew survey in 2013 was all done by telephone calls, reaching out to people. The people don't realize this, but the Pew survey that was done in 2020 was all done online. There's a couple of factors. First of all, it's become so hard to reach people on the phone. People are canceling their landline phones. They only answer their cell phones. There's laws about cold calling cell phones that limit their ability. Everyone's looking at their phone when the phone rings, and if it's a number they don't recognize, they don't answer. It's become so hard to reach people through the phone that even the Pew survey in 2020, they said, you know what, we just couldn't do it. We did an online survey, and when we asked them the question, can you compare 2020 to 2013 Pew survey, they said, we were hoping the answer would be yes, but the answer is really no. They are different. But I mean, there's a reality of the world. In 2016, when the election results came in, everyone said, why did the pollsters blow it? Everybody said Clinton was going to beat Trump. Why did they blow it? And the answer is, as you said, that the people, some people are more interested in responding to surveys than others. And in those days of telephone surveys, a higher percentage of people who intended to vote for Donald Trump, when the phone said that Quinnipiac survey, public opinion survey, they said don't answer it. So a higher percentage of people who were planning to vote for Clinton picked up the phone and answered it, and a lower percentage. That's an issue that the polling community is working with. And you're right, it's challenging. I mean, one of the things I do is I use some statistical methods that are too complicated to get into. I can explain them briefly, but I do explain them in some of the surveys. But we try to adjust for the fact that some groups have a greater propensity to respond than other groups.
Because you mentioned that when it comes to Charedi community, some of them more reticent to answer some questions, and let's say the non-Orthodox.
Yeah, it's especially a challenge. So when I asked the Charedi community a question, do you daven Shacharis every day? And it comes back, the number came back a few percentage points lower than I expected. It was in the 80s, not in the 90s. And people asked me why that is. And I said, well, because the fact is that the guy who davens every day and then learns all day and then does daf yomi every day probably is not as interested in responding to a survey as the guy who doesn't. So there's definitely a bias in the response. It's a bias to the left. So percentages like the one I just mentioned about people saying, the percentage of people who say, I daven Shacharis every day, being in the mid 80 range, it's probably a few points higher. But
what about in the modern Orthodox community? What was the same response?
Yeah, it was lower. It was it was about 10 or 15 percentage points lower, which is what we expected. I mean, the modern Orthodox has a wide range of. The modern Orthodox includes people who are orthoprax, who are living an Orthodox life, but don't have the same emunah and full beliefs that somebody in the yeshivish community typically has. One of the things we found is that the modern Orthodox community is extremely, extremely diverse within that group. It's kind of a home to people who want to be traditional, but not too right-wingish.
So define modern Orthodox then, because obviously you're saying it's a broad tent. So how would you define it?
Well, the first time I floated my survey, I had categories: are you Hasidish, Yeshivish, modern Orthodox? And one person said to me, I'm not modern Orthodox because a woman said to me, I am not modern Orthodox because I cover my hair. I said, well, that because I cover my hair. So I said, there are modern Orthodox people who cover their hair. But in my attitudes, I tend to be modern. I mean, she watches movies, goes to the movies, goes to shows. I ended up changing the wording to, are you modern and or centrist Orthodox? And I think the centrist Orthodox is kind of a label that Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb, he liked centrist better than modern, because modern as an adjective, modern is a word that has meaning. It's an adjective. And our goal is not to be modern. Our goal is to be from Orthodox. Centrist is more positional. Centrist is, okay, I'm in the middle. That he could live with. So we ended up using the words modern or centrist. We don't really define it we don't define it beyond that. When we ask people, are you modern or centrist Orthodox? Are you Hasidish? Are you Yeshivish? About 95% of people have no problem checking one of those boxes. A few people say, I'm a combination, but people understand what the labels mean.
So, for example, you have many in the tent. You have Yeshiva University people who look at Teaneck. Teaneck is more of a YU community, and I guess you can label that, modern Orthodox Machmir.
Yes.
Okay, then you have those that
Okay.
maybe, that do partnership minyanim, where that's on the fringe. That's maybe almost conservadox. So you have Yeshiva Chovei
Yes.
Torah on more on the left side.
Yes.
So does your surveys reflect those different? Because those are pretty broad areas
Yes.
within the modern Orthodox community, from
Yes.
right to extreme left.
That's a very good question. So when we almost always, when we ask people up front, they say, yes, I'm modern or centrist Orthodox. A follow-up question that we almost always ask is, okay, so you told us you are modern or centrist Orthodox. Would you say you are liberal modern Orthodox? Would you say you are centrist modern Orthodox? Or would you say you are centrist modern Orthodox leaning towards the right, towards yeshivish? Wording, something like that. So we divide it into categories. So we do get a sense of this. And one thing I will tell you is that in proving your earlier point, we usually get a few more people saying I'm modern Orthodox left of center, and a few less saying I'm modern Orthodox right of center. And one of the adjustments we make is to balance that out.
So let me ask you, the modern Orthodox community as a whole, is it right, left, center? What have you found in your survey?
Well, we did ask the question a couple of ways. One, we asked the question is, are you currently more observant in your orthodoxy than you were 5 or 10 years ago? And we do see a shift to the right. Some people say no, but there's definitely a shift towards more orthodoxy. We also ask people, are your children more observant than you are? And we see the same thing there. We see more people say yes. More people say, I am myself more Orthodox than I was 10 years ago, and my child is more Orthodox than me. So on the one hand, the community as a whole is kind of sliding to the right, to use a term that Professor Sam Howman used,
right? We had him on. We wrote the book
ago.
Sliding to the Right. Yes.
Right. But also you have off the derech, people moving to the left. So I mean, the analogy I like to give is I once gave a talk where I held up a picture of, you might remember this, something called silly putty. Remember silly putty? The thing about silly putty is if you pull it slowly, it stretches and it's good. It's still together, it's stretching. But if you pull it hard, it breaks. And I said, that kind of is a picture of our community. I mean, you got people moving to the right, you got people moving to the left. They're all still under this big tent called modern/centrist Orthodox. And we all get together more or less, but there's definitely a stretching to the right and to the left going on.
We're speaking with Mark Trencher, the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned. And if you'd like to chime in, 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. You can email Zev at talklinenetwork.com. zev@talklinenetwork.com, and we are giving away some more of those 3-pack Tuscanini Moscato grape juice. Keep sending those emails to zev@talklinenetwork.com. Please put your name, address, and zip code in the email, and put on the headline grape juice if you can't write Tuscanini. I think some of you have actually spelled it. Most people put grape juice that I've seen and I'm sending it to us. Again, that's zev@talklinenetwork.com. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Mark Trencher is our guest, the founder of Nishma. People call me, what is it spelled? Nishma. Nishma Research conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community. Let's take some of your phone calls. Let's go to Alex in Brooklyn. Your question or comment. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, hi, Zeb. Thanks for taking the call. Hi, Mark. I appreciate the service you're giving to the community because it's definitely interesting to know that information. I'll be checking out the website. But I have two questions. I'm wondering, how do you get the phone numbers of the people that you're calling? What are those numbers based on? Is it, different, do you go through the phone book of the community? And the other question is, how many people do you have in each poll that you do?
Okay, so in terms of phone numbers, we don't actually use phone numbers. We use we use primarily email addresses, and I get the email addresses from various sorts, from various sources, through email blast lists, WhatsApp notifications, and group lists. We contact people through emails, also through Shuls. I've done a lot of surveys through Shuls, where the Shul rabbi will send an announcement to their membership. At the end, for many of my surveys, are done that way, and on average, right now I'm doing my 14th survey. The 14 surveys have had a total of over 500 different questions we've asked. As I mentioned earlier, all the questions come from the community, and we've had a total. Right now, we're up around 31,000 people. It varies in total. So wow. For the least we've had for any survey, we did a survey of at the low end, we did a survey of the off the derech was 885. We did a survey of people who Baalei Teshuva, people who did not grow up Orthodox but became Orthodox, and we had about 800 there. So they all range between 800. Wow. A lot of them are in the 2,000 range. The one I'm doing now on politics, it's been out 6 days, and we've got 2,300 responses. So I don't ask for phone numbers. The surveys are all confidential. There's no information collected that can identify the people who respond to the survey. A lot of my surveys have a raffle where I'll give away an Amazon card or a Visa card, and at the end, if people want to register, they give me their email. But that goes into a separate file, and then I use that to randomly pick a few winners. So,
how much time do you? How long does it take you until you decide that you're going to go with the results? What's the timeline from when you start doing the survey till you finish?
It's pretty fast. I'm retired, so this is basically what I'm devoting my time to. Of the 14 surveys that I've done, nine of them I have funded them fully. I'm just doing this as a service to the community. I've had sponsorship for a few, but the benefit is I don't have a big bureaucracy. If a bunch of people come to me and say, let's study this and this topic, I'll get together a group. What are the questions you want to know? You want to know the answers to? I'll come up with a questionnaire. We'll test it. We'll do some testing, make sure it makes sense. And so we can do a survey. We can do a survey in a matter of literally. We can do a large scale survey in a matter of 6 to 8 weeks in total, from the conceptual stage to the questionnaire development, programming online, people filling it out, and we write the report, which a full-fledged research practice might take 6 months to do. So
okay, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for a good question. By the way, if somebody goes online, can they participate in the survey?
Yeah, they could if they. Okay, so I would say that if you go to nishmaresearch.com, nishmaresearch.com, you'll see a link that says social research on the top. That'll take you to a page that has all of the reports. You'll also see a link that says contact me. And if you go to there, it'll show you my email address. Your best bet is just to send an email to me, Mark at Nishma Research. Say, hey, I heard you're doing a survey on politics. Send me the link. I'll send you the link. Or if you want to be put on our list, we have a list of over 5,000 people who have been asked to be put on the list. So every time we do a survey, they get notified. And that includes modern Orthodox and Yeshivish and Hasidish people. They just want to participate in surveys. So I could be happy to put people on that list as well.
Let's go to Sal and Flatbush. Go ahead, Sal. Shavua Tov.
Yeah, good talk, Zev. Yeah, I just want to make a comment regarding what you said earlier, that in the modern Orthodox community, you unfortunately, tuition sometimes tends to be like a birth control factor. But to be perfectly honest, high tuition in modern Orthodox communities doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's sort of a mirror of the priorities of the community. You have mostly in your modern Orthodox community, they have certain demands of, the qualification of the teachers, the level of quality of the secular education. Obviously, a school is going to have this in the modern Orthodox community spend a lot more money on personnel, and the people in that community know that going in. In the Charedi community, that's what makes it. They know going in basically that the kind of schools that they want presented to them is going to be unaffordable if they have 4 or 5 or 6 kids. So it's sort of a two-way street. In the Charedi community, the priorities are such that the schools don't necessarily have to have such high pedigree and level of education and qualifications, because there the priority is to have a bigger family.
And very interesting, good point. Mark, your response.
Yeah. Also, the priorities have a bigger family. Also, the priority there is more of a. There may be more of a priority on the Limudei Kodesh. They may be more of a priority on the secular studies being okay so a person can get an occupation in whatever field it is. But you're right. The expectations. I mentioned earlier that we did a survey of cost, and at the end of the survey, we asked people. Is it worth it? And it was interesting to me that the yeshivish people had the highest level. 95% said that the cost of what they were spending were worth it, including the cost of education. I think to some extent, as you kind of hinted at, they're kind of like in a. I'm going to use the term a sweet spot. They're kind of in a sweet spot as far as the education, or as far as what they expect from education. They expect the kids to learn how to be Orthodox from Jews, to be knowledgeable, to have belief system, to have some knowledge of secular studies, so they can work in the business world. But what you said earlier about segments of the Orthodox community having high expectations, you want your kid to go to an Ivy League college, okay? So I mean, that's an expense that'll cost you all the way down to kindergarten. In terms of where you send your kids. So
but what Sal's saying though is that the expectation, in other words, you get what you're paying for. So the tuition is much higher in the modern Orthodox world, but you have a better building, you have a better gym, you have a more sophisticated lab, you have more experienced teachers, as opposed to, let's say, Haredi school. The building may not be as fancy, they won't have as fancy gym, etc., etc. So parents know going in that, of course, a modern Orthodox education is going to be much more expensive than the yeshiva education.
Right. That's great.
Right. Very, very true.
Okay. That was
anyway,
my
Sal, thank you for your question. Just moving on to a couple, and we'll get to your phone calls in just another moment. What about the flipping out factor? It used to be a factor when you heard modern Orthodox kids went to Israel, they flipped that. Is that still the case?
Yeah, we had some questions around that issue, but we never actually included them in a survey. I mean, I can only tell you from my own experience that it does happen, but I haven't researched it. It's definitely something of interest.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, and here's the other elephant in the room. What about the transgender gay factor? How is that a role? Have you surveyed both the Haredi and the modern Orthodox community, including how the acceptance within the respective communities?
To some extent. One thing, by the way, when I give talks before modern Orthodox groups, and I used to say that you could fit the entire American modern Orthodox community into 6 National Football League stadiums on a Sunday, just to give people an impression of how small we are. But lately, I've been saying that for every American Orthodox Jew, there are between 2 and 3 transgender people. So it's out there. The question that we did ask of the modern Orthodox community, we asked, how do you feel about an LGBTQ, a gay person, being a member of your shul, and a majority, over 50%, supported it. In the most right-leaning group, and the people who identified as modern Orthodox but leaning towards the yeshivish, it was down to 25%. But somebody said to me, "Well, Mark, you should have asked a tougher question. You should have asked about a same-sex couple. Would you accept that?" in your shul, or how do you feel about your shul giving a mazel tov to a couple, same-sex couple that were getting married? Yeah, those are more challenging questions. I mean, I think the issue of the well, not necessarily transgender, but just the issue of LGBTQ, of gays, that is one issue in which you might say that the kind of the shift in society, in the world, in American society, you see it a little bit in the Jewish community as well. We can't stay totally isolated. You see there's been huge acceptance of LGBTQ in American society, and there is some growing acceptance in the modern Orthodox world. Certainly less so in the Charedi world.
But true, but what you mentioned, by the way, I don't know if any even left-wing Orthodox synagogues will just wish a gay couple mazel tov. I think the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale got into trouble when in a newsletter, and they were threatened to be thrown out of the Orthodox Union if they would continue to do so, and they dropped that practice. The question, though, is when you have more modern Orthodox co-ed schools accepting transgender kids, gay kids, and that I think you find more of an acceptance in some of the more left modern Orthodox schools. Again, it's relatively new territory.
It's new territory. As I mentioned, the survey I plan to do in early 2024 is a survey of modern Orthodox day school, high school students. And some of these issues are issues that you can kind of ask kids whether they're exposed to it and how they think about it. The other issue, I mentioned the whole issue of LGBTQ and transgender being an example of how a pretty significant shift in secular society over the last 20 years. You have to admit that in broad American society, there's been a big shift. You do see it in the Jewish community. The other area where there's been a shift in American society is the role of women, and we've done a couple of times. We've asked people how they feel about a woman being president of their shul. There's pretty much, even in the yeshivish world, people there's not a lot of opposition to it. It's more negative.
You have a Charedi judge, a woman judge in the community. You have others, politicians, elected officials. So you see a change. A lot of people waiting to speak to you. Just one other thing. There was one Orthodox synagogue, and dealing with transgender, there's, I think, Hebrew Institute of Riverdale had a rebbitzin of the assistant rabbi who was transgendering from woman to male. I think that the rabbi has since resigned, but for a period of time where she announced she was transgendering, that was acceptable in that community. Again, it's not the norm of most modern Orthodox institutions, but you did have that situation recently in the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Let's go to Menachem in Maplewood, New Jersey. Your question for our guest. Go ahead, Menachem.
Good luck, Zev. A fascinating program. Mark, two questions. Number one, on your poll with the 800 or so smart people who went off the derech, how many of those people have intermarried or would agree to intermarry?
Well, so the issue of it was interesting that when we asked these people who left Orthodoxy what their relationships were like with their parents, with their siblings, with their kids, the percentage that had a good relationship with their children was very high, very high. Children continue to bind the people together even after they go off the derech, even after a divorce. So we did not specifically ask. We asked them what their marital status is now. We didn't ask whether they intermarried, but my impression from the data and from what I've heard is that there's a real that there. If you have children, if you go off the derech and you have children, and now you have whatever joint custody or some kind of arrangement where you see the kids every other Shabbos or something, there's a very strong impetus there to not intermarry, because you've gone one step, you've left the community, you're no longer from. But I think at that point to intermarry would be harmful to the relationship with the children. So that's something we did not explicitly survey, but I think that's just my impression.
But wouldn't there be more of a forgive me, just a second, is there any statistics how many in the modern Orthodox community intermarry as opposed to the Charedi community? Because we mentioned this a shift to the right, but they're also among kids that go to secular colleges. Some of them, even when they went to Israel, tend to become less observant and might even intermarry.
Right, it's very true. I will tell you a couple on the survey of people who left Orthodoxy. I did get an email from a rabbi in California, and he said, nobody people said that they left for intellectual reasons or because they questioned it. Did anybody say they went off the derech because they went to college and they met a nice non-Jewish girl? And in reality, nobody said that, which either means it didn't happen. It might mean that sometimes a person who's remembering back after 20 years, we're asking people, why did you leave? And some of these people are in their 40s and they left when they were like 20.
But some of them, I think some of the women converted also. Some of them may have.
Yeah, some of them converted. So I mean, there's definitely an issue of memory there, and but we didn't hear a lot of that though.
Menachem, anything else?
Mark, yeah. My question number 2, Mark. Did you, in one of your surveys, come up with a result that you found was so astounding that you thought that you made a mistake?
Well,
and that there was an error.
Yeah. So actually, I remember when I was reading the Pew survey in 2013, and I came to a page that said that among American modern Orthodox Jews, they said that 42% of American modern Orthodox Jews are Baalei Teshuva. And I thought, I was writing them a letter. I said, that's a crazy number. Maybe it's 10%, 15%. When I did my survey in 2017, I came up with 40%.
Wow.
And it is actually, if you go out in the community and talk to people that are modern Orthodox today, a very high percentage of them did not grow up modern Orthodox. Now, I will say this.
Can you compare that to the Charedi community, the numbers of Baalei Teshuvas?
Yeah, we didn't measure it, but it seems to be more in the 10 to 15% range. But the thing is that people who are we're looking at the population of modern Orthodox, a lot of them actually continue to move. So a person might have started as kind of a smart, inquisitive, somewhat traditional, conservative Jew, and then they liked. In our survey of the people who became Orthodox, we asked them, why did you become Orthodox? And the number one reason people gave, the top 2 reasons were Orthodoxy is more authentic. It's the authentic version of Judaism. But equal to that, they said people were intellectually attracted to Judaism. They were curious. You go into any base medrash and it kind of blows your mind. You see the extent of the learning, the depth of knowledge, the commentaries, the Mishnah, Gemara, etc. There's just a lot there. So that's
one of the reasons why I asked. One of the reasons why I asked that is because I happen to be a member of Chabad, and I find that in Chabads there are a large percentage of Baalei Teshuvas.
Well, that's what Chabad does.
Very large.
Yeah, well, I mean, but in terms of percentage, I mean, there's a large percentage. I mean, I don't know about 40%, but there is. I'm still I'm surprised. I'm not. I don't fall into that category, but I just can't get over it.
And Menachem, good points. Thank you for calling. Call again.
Thank you. Sure.
Okay, let's move on to Rifki and Borough Park. Rifki and Borough Park, your question for our guest. Go ahead.
Yes. You were discussing about the tuition for Charedi people or Hasidic people, as far as or those that are more modern. You did not take into account the neighborhoods. Neighborhoods like Borough Park and Williamsburg have a lot of programs that help these parents with the tuition, specifically from preschool through 8th grade, not high school. But other neighborhoods like Muncie, Lakewood, Monroe, all of those neighborhoods don't help, whether they're Hasidic or modern Orthodox. There are no programs there to help with the tuition. Are you aware of that?
No, in the report that I wrote, I did mention that one of the things that in all these from communities, there's a very strong social support network, gemachs, etc., tzedakahs, etc. I didn't really differentiate. I didn't compare Borough Park to.
Well, these are government programs.
Okay.
These are government programs, and they help along with the tuition, and it makes a very big difference.
Now, are you talking about Rifki? Are you talking about vouchers? What kind of programs are you referring to?
Oh, they have a lot of them. There's Head Start, Giant Step, there's vouchers. There's tons of programs. As a matter of fact, there's very often an ad in the paper saying if you have a child this age, if you have a boy this age, you can come to our school for free because we have a program and you won't have to pay anything.
Oh, I
This
didn't see
is
those
very
ads.
often I see in the
We should
paper.
promote that.
Yeah.
because- wow, that's a good free
I see
tuition.
it very often. And I got news for you. This is a major factor in people's decision to move out of Borough Park or Williamsburg. Because even though the housing is cheaper in, let's say, Lakewood or Muncie, but they end up paying so much more money for tuition. And another big thing is bus service. In those neighborhoods, bus service are a very big expense. So
True.
it makes a major difference. Now, I wanted to tell you something else. I don't know, you said you get your people, you survey the people through email, but I live in Borough Park. I have 2 landlines. And I'm very often asked by the Quintiac poll. They call me up to ask me questions. My husband, thinks it's very funny. He says, "Oh, I wouldn't bother with these people." But I grew up in a way answering survey questions. My mother was a participant in something way back in the 1960s, something called National Family Opinion. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have.
You did?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So my mother was a participant, and I grew up watching her, that she answered questions and she tested products for them. And very often they rewarded her with little gifts and things. And she found it enjoyable. And I, in turn, got used to that idea. So I always ask, if I get called by these polls, I'll answer the questions. But I have to tell you that lately, I'm beginning to believe, I tell my husband, you know what, you're right. I just hang up on them. Some of the questions they ask are really not proper. They're not, you mentioned about asking questions about the gay community. If you ask Charedi people such questions, they would hang up on you.
Right. That's true.
It's not we're not used to this type of thing. So when I get called by a poll and they start asking me very personal type questions, I say, it was nice speaking to you. Goodbye. We're not used to it.
Yeah. The questions the questions have to make sense. They have to be appropriate. I mean, I ask questions in a survey about the role of women in a shul. Should a woman be able to do this or that? And to be honest, a lot of those questions, I only ask the people who said I'm modern Orthodox. If somebody said they're Hasidic, I didn't ask them because it wouldn't make it's so out of their scope of what their experiences are.
Out of right.
That it would be insulting to them to ask them. It didn't make sense. So you have to ask questions.
They would think you were making fun of them or something.
Exactly. And also you have to use questions. A lot of times you get something that they say it's a survey, but it's not a survey. They're trying to sell you a product. So this is not a research.
Right.
You're wrecking the field of research. Yeah, but thank you.
And I'm very grateful that I have a phone that what's it called?
Caller ID.
It not caller ID. The phones today, you could put in certain numbers and
blocking. Yeah, blocking.
Call block. It blocks some of these callers. So I find that very helpful today.
And Rifki, as always, thank you for a good point, and keep calling us.
No problem.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation for a little while longer. We're looking at polling in the Orthodox Jewish community. What do we think? Mark Trencher is the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community. He also hosts the Orthonomics podcast. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Again, our numbers to call in, 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. You can email us, zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. We're still taking contestants. If you'd like to win a 3-pack of Tuscanini Moscato grape juice, courtesy of Keiko, send me an email, zev@talklinenetwork.com. Please put your name, address, zip code, and put grape juice in the byline. If you want to put Tuscanini, you can do so. If you want to spell it, if not, just put grape juice. And we're going to give away some more of those 3-pack grape juice. Reminder that on Sunday nights, we're on WOR 710 on the AM dial and iHeart radio station, one from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. And we're rated number 3 by Nielsen in New York. So check us out Sunday nights, and of course, 24 hours a day, talklinenetwork.com. We'll be right back. And as I said, I have used Marty on numerous occasions and needed to get a really good quality, top of the line appliance. I didn't want to spend the full rate, and you get such a steep discount because he buys clothes out. So check it out. And I think you'll be as satisfied as I am.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Mark Trencher is our guest, the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community. Let's tackle singles. What's the status with singles in both parts of the Jewish community?
Yeah, so singles are interesting. And one of the questions I often get asked is, are your research studies, somebody said to me, are your research studies descriptive or prescriptive? And usually I don't try to give answers or solutions to problems. I just basically do research and try to find out what's going on and explain it to people. But in the case of the singles, we actually did a survey of singles. The survey had two parts. The first part was open to everybody, older, younger, married, single, etc. And basically of that section of the survey was to see how connected people were to the community. So we asked people, are you a member of a shul? Do you feel valued in your shul? Do people listen? Do you feel welcomed in your shul? Do you feel welcomed in your community? And we created something called, we called it the Index of Community Connection, just how connected people are. And then we looked at all different groups. We looked at singles versus married, older versus younger. Among about a dozen different groups we looked at, the group that had the lowest level of connection to their community were the singles. Now, I will tell you on a scale from 0 to 100, they came in at about 70, which is not terrible. It means that even those groups within Orthodoxy that are less connected are still strongly connected to the community, but the singles were least connected. In the second part of that survey, which is available online, we asked people, what are your goals in life? We wanted to find out to what extent was getting married a goal compared to other things, compared to health or accomplishments or education or career. Are you dating? How's that working out for you? It was a whole series of questions. How do you assess the shidduch system? So we did conduct a fairly lengthy survey about singles, and one of the in the case of that survey, we actually the group that I did this for, which is called PORAT, P-O-R-A-T, asked me to do the survey, and they hired Professor Sylvia Fishman, who's a very well-known sociologist at Brandeis. She's Orthodox, member of an Orthodox shul in Newton, and she looked at the results and she came up with a document saying, here are the things that shuls should do to make their single members more welcome. So that was, in that case, that survey, I call that prescriptive, because we actually gave some guidance to improve the situation. So that was an interesting survey, and we deeply explored the Orthodox single community.
Now, do we have any statistics as to what ages people are getting married, let's say in the Charedi world as opposed to the modern Orthodox world? Because some people tend to push off marriage in the case of the modern Orthodox due to college education or getting a job.
Right.
So I'd be curious. But then again, there's a shidduch crisis we have in all segments. We have different proposals being made that maybe they should date, younger. So there is a crisis. I was curious to know what the numbers show.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers still show that in the Charedi community, people get married much earlier. Very common for 19, 20, even 18, 21. In the modern Orthodox world, it's quite common to have people marrying in their 30s, even the 30s or even 40s, certainly in the mid to upper 20s. But you did mention the shidduch crisis. I mean, we've all read about some of the solutions to the shidduch crisis. If men would be willing to marry women 2 or 3 years older than them, that would statistically help, and it's been shown that it would help because of the rapid growth of the community. So,
been happening?
I don't think so, but I mean,
I don't think so either. But I saw the proposals, right?
Yeah, right. So I mean, it's definitely an issue people still talk about, the shidduch crisis. I did it. One person told me who works with modern Orthodox men. He said one of the problems is that men more often modern Orthodox men more often leave Orthodoxy. There are more men going off the derech than women, so that creates a misbalance as well. That means there's more women than men.
I've seen that. In fact,
Yeah,
if I remember, Moment Magazine did a survey years ago. I'm not necessarily in the Orthodox community, but according to their statistics, the older a woman gets, the less available men there are available, because you have the factor that more men tend to marry than women did. At least this goes back 20, 30 years. I don't know if the numbers still hold today. Then you have the Nebuch factor, and you have the gay factor, and you have other factors. So you end up with screwed where you have, I think you can have like more women, like maybe 4 women to every man. And there's some crazy statistics. I don't remember it exactly. It's been a while since I looked at it. But the older a woman gets, the less available Jewish men there are out there, which creates its own set of problems.
right. Very true. Very true.
Now, let's look at divorce. Divorce is something which is cancer in our societies, no matter what religious group one is involved with. Have you done any polling as to see what the divorce statistics are like, as who's getting divorced and what the numbers are?
We haven't done that, but the one thing we did do is in the survey we did fairly recently, when we had a list of 18 issues, and we said, which of these issues do you think that your Orthodox community must address in the next 10 years? Out of 18 issues, among the modern Orthodox, divorce ranked as number 17, way down the list. Because I don't think there are fewer divorces in the modern Orthodox. I think it's just become, okay, it's a divorce. I mean, it's become more accepted. I mean, accepted unwillingly, but accepted. If you look at in the Hasidic community, 52% of the Hasidic said we must address the issue of divorce in the next 10 years. And in the Yeshivish community, also 48%. So in both of in the Charedi world, there's definitely more people are upset. I think it needs to be addressed with. I mean, I think on the other hand, I think there's actually more, I don't have statistics, but I think there are significantly more numbers of divorces in the modern Orthodox world, but there's some acceptance of it there.
So you're saying the numbers because it's not a concern because it's so more prevalent, or is it the fact that we're seeing an increase in the Charedi community divorce rate? Because somebody was telling me, and again, I don't know if this is true, that some of the Batei Dinim, some of the Jewish courts of law, can have a divorce a day on average in Lakewood.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but
it's not scientifically proven. This is what one of the people mentioned to me. But the truth is, I've gone to different events and seen so many women that are divorced come from the Charedi community, all kinds of issues out there. So it is an issue. It's a problem. I don't have the statistics.
Right. There is one interesting statistic, which is that although in the modern Orthodox world, divorce rates are at the bottom of the list in terms of being an issue that we need to address, an issue that is very, very high up on the list among modern Orthodox is dealing with agunot, women who can't get it, and that's very high among the modern Orthodox and much lower among the Charedi. So the modern Orthodox are upset about the agunot, but not so much about divorces. So that is interesting.
Now, I know you've done surveys on COVID. Now, from what I understand, and I've spoken to different rabbis, a lot of people, of course, didn't go to shul because of COVID. The question, though, is how many have returned to shul once COVID crisis was over, and how have shuls changed? Some of the modern Orthodox have changed the style of davening, the length of davening, etc., because of COVID. Have you done any surveys regarding that?
We did a couple of surveys we did a survey in 2020 and 2021. We haven't followed up more recently, but we found a few interesting things. We found that modern Orthodox shuls did make some radical changes. They all went to Zoom davening, which was very rare in the Charedi world. People in the Charedi world went to shul. In the modern Orthodox world, people stayed home. People have told us they enjoyed davening at home, but they've come back to shul. A lot of the shuls to this day have slightly shorter length of services. Some of the things they've cut out, they still are not there. There are a small number of people who are still staying away from shuls or going to a different shul. There are just a handful of backyard minyanim. I think to a large extent, things have pretty much settled down. I mean, one of the questions we asked is some of the changes, some of the, you might say kulos, some of the leniencies that we applied during COVID, do you think we need to keep them? And a significant majority said, no, we want things to go back to the way they were. So to some extent, they have gone back to the way they were. So that's good news. We did do that. I mentioned earlier, we did a survey sponsored by Hatzalah. That survey asked about attitudes towards vaccines. And we did find varying levels of, we call it vaccine hesitancy, nervousness. Very few people, there were very few conspiracy theory kind of answers given. It was more just people were at that time concerned that the vaccines were new, wait and see attitudes. But we did see levels of vaccine hesitancy that were high. On the other hand, you're talking about a community where almost everybody got COVID, which gives you immunity. So when you add together the percentage of people who had it and got immunity with the people who got vaccinated, you ended up with the result of people having some immunity through one method or the other.
What about people who took the vaccine? Any numbers?
Well, at that time it was still early. The vaccine had been released fairly recently, so we did ask people, have you taken it? But the numbers are very low because it was early on. And then if you haven't taken the vaccine, are you likely to take it? Will you definitely take it? Will you probably? So when you add all those together, across the I'm going on memory, across the modern Orthodox community, the vaccine, having taken it or plan to take it, were like 85%. Among the Charedi, it was in the range of 65%. But things have changed.
Was that broken down by neighborhood?
It was not broken down by neighborhood. We did ask, for the people who said they were Hasidish, we did ask, are you Satmar, Bobav, Ger, Bells, Sant, etc. So some of the numbers we have by group, but the other thing we found that was interesting was we did, and I'll share this with you, that somebody who was Chabad Lubavitch called me and said, can you break out the Chabad in Crown Heights from the Shluchim, the ones that are in, Fort Wayne, Indiana, etc. And we did that, and it was fascinating because they were vastly different. The Chabad, the Shluchim, were in the hinterlands. In many ways, were closer to modern Orthodox in terms of attitudes towards vaccines, while the ones that were in the neighborhood, in the hood, in Crown Heights, were very much more like the Charedi in the New York area.
So before I take the next phone call, did you do a survey among the Chabad? How many believe the Rebbe is Mashiach and how many don't?
I didn't do that survey. I don't know if I don't think I'd want to do it, but
Susan in Brooklyn, go ahead. Your question for our guest. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay. Maybe I missed this, but I don't know how you're defining modern Orthodox and First and Charedi. And if you want to know how correct some of this is, I know some of the Rebbeim YU, which is usually called modern Orthodox. Their kids got married at about 19, so all generalizations are really a problem. How do you do surveys, and how do you decide, what you call modern and Charedi?
Yeah, so in the research world, there's a lot. The general guideline is, somebody said to me, well, why don't you ask them if they daven every day, if they keep their hair covered, if they put on tefillin every day, and then you decide if they're Orthodox or not. But that's not the way it works. In the research world, we ask people, what are you? How do you define yourself? And normally when I start my surveys, the first question I ask is, in which of these groups do you most closely identify? So they'll get a choice, modern or centrist Orthodox, one choice. Another choice would be Hasidish, including Chabad Lubavitch. I could break them out separately. I could say Hasidish, not including Chabad, and then separately Chabad Lubavitch, because they're different. And then there's always a category that is Yeshivish, Aguda, Litvish. And then sometimes I'll have a category saying none of the above, but I do tend to be a little more modern, or none of the above, and I do tend to be a little bit more Charedi. And then there might be an other in which they write in what they are.
Wow.
So it's all self-identification. Somebody made fun of me for having so many categories, but the fact of the matter is that with that list of categories, almost everybody, about 95%, check one of those boxes. So if a person says, now, as I mentioned, if somebody checks the box I'm centrist or modern or centrist Orthodox. Most of my surveys, I ask a question later on saying, are you more liberal modern Orthodox? Are you like centrist? Are you more machmir? If you look at like the Soy with Sinai surveys, that when they ask people who are dating, they have similar kind of categories. I'm more liberal leaning. So basically, and it's important. It's important because what we found is that when we ask later on questions, the answers vary tremendously by how people identify themselves. So we are a very diverse
Very
group, but
interesting.
yeah, and that's how people define themselves.
And
Thank you.
thank you. And by the way, I think the three areas that might separate modern Orthodoxy from regular Haredi Judaism would be, of course, the role of women, the role of the State of Israel, and also how you view secular education. I think those are the three main factors. And so, in fact, we're curious to know, have you also done a survey among the Haredi community of what value, how they view secular education in light of the whole controversy with yeshiva education and New York State? Have you done a survey as far as attitudes towards secular education?
We have not done that yet. No.
It might be an interesting category. I'd be curious to see what you would come up with.
Right. We've done it among modern Orthodox, but not among Haredi. So that's.
So what did you find among the modern Orthodox?
We found out everything is important. That all the various aspects of education are important. We did ask them to assess their children's schools, and they give very good grades to both secular education and Jewish education, which of course makes sense because that's the school that sending their kid to. If they didn't like the school, they'd be going to a different school. So most people do find a school that they find acceptable. But some of these questions I would love to ask among Haredi parents. The key thing is somebody comes to me with a survey and they say, I did a survey and people are satisfied with this and satisfied with that and not satisfied with that. What do I do with it? So I always say to them, well, before you ask people if they're satisfied with something, did you ask them what's most important? Did you ask them how important is it that they learn Gemara? How important is it that they learn world history? Because you have to ask whether something's important before you can decide whether or not people are satisfied. So I think to ask Haredi parents, how important is it that your child learn English or mathematics or world history, Chumash, Tanakh, Gemara. I mean, these are interesting. I'd be very curious to see what how they even among the Jewish studies, we may find that that there are aspects that kids are learning that are less important. Somewhere they're not learning, which people might find is more valuable.
Let me ask you this: before you had mentioned that that with Baalei Teshuva, as people return to Judaism, that's also, especially among the modern Orthodox, that's a greater factor. How many of them become Baalei Teshuva, stay Baalei Teshuva? I remember seeing a survey, and I can't recall if it was from Lincoln Square Synagogue or for some other institution, where it seemed to be where there was a drop. I think even among Chabad there was a drop off, and the drop off was more if they were family oriented. They had families, they tend to stay more. If they were singles, there was more of a chance of them dropping out.
Yes, we did see that, and the one thing we saw was that people become Baalei Teshuva, and then now they've been a Baalei Teshuva for a year, 2 years, and they're at place X. They're in the middle of modern Orthodoxy, or they're more yeshivish. Almost always, they end up years later. They end up moving further. They become either more to the right. I mean, a lot of people become modern Orthodox, and then after a few years, they say, I really identify as yeshivish. And some have said to me, I started, it was all gung ho, and I took on everything, and I was even machmir on a lot of things, and that kind of eased off somewhat. And I'm still Orthodox, but I am not quite where I was. So there's just a lot of fluidity. One of the surveys I wanted to do is titled "Choosing My Religion," because we live in strange times. And my perception is that in the old days, you were what you were, and that's all that you were. You were from a Yid, and that's how you lived your life. Today we live in a society of it's an American value, choice. Be the person you want to be. And I think to some extent that's also true within Judaism. People are taking on. There was an article on Jewish Action, Neo-Hasidism, and there was a picture of a nice young man on the front cover of Jewish Action, a kid from my shul. His parents are very, I would say, liberal, modern Orthodox. And you looked at him, he looks like he's Hasidish. Hasidic, long payas, nice kid. People are choosing the kind of religion that they want to live, and that's even true among Baalei Teshuva. People take on the things they want to take on. They take on the things that they enjoy doing, and but you're right. In the area of Baalei Teshuva, there's a lot of continued movement into even more religiosity, but there's also some kind of easing up on it to some extent.
I was chuckling as you were speaking because I remember going to give out Shalach Manos at the Israeli army, and I saw this Hasidic man with long payas, and I think he had a beard. And I said, a chassid in the Israeli army? I said, what kind of chassid are you? Because I'm a chassid Rav Kook. I said, wow. And so, but he looked, real Hasidish, but he was a chassid Rav Kook, which was interesting to see. So You're right. There was a neo-Hasidic move. Even Yeshiva University tried to brought in Rabbi Weinberger from the Five Towns to bring a more Hasidic spirit. Again, I don't know if it's covered in your surveys, but here's the interesting thing. In the Charedi world, you have more of a neshama, you have maybe less intellectualism. In the mono-Orthodox schools, more like Litvaks, where you have intellectualism, but you don't have much of the spirituality. And the thing is to try to blend the two. And I'm not sure, if there's more yeshivas trying to, I know YU has been trying, others have been trying to blend the two. And have there been any surveys to show that dichotomy between the spirituality and intellectualism and to see where it's going?
Right. Very true, very true.
Now, here's the clincher. Before you mentioned, Mark, you mentioned that you have a situation where you have in the mono-Orthodox community, you have people the kids becoming more and more religious. And they may start out mono-Orthodox, may become Charedi as time moves on. I'm wondering if the converse is true. If you find some in the Charedi community a trend where some start out the way tend to be mono-Orthodox. I know Jew in the City, Allison Josephs, has really pitched and saying to Charedim, if you're leaving, don't leave it, become mono-Orthodox. I'm wondering if there's any trends that have been trackable.
Yeah, I don't have any data. You're right. I mean, Allison Josephs has been very successful in getting people to Project Makom. They have a place. They find a Makom within modern Orthodoxy. The people I spoke to who were Charedi and who left were traumatized to the extent that they didn't think, the people in my survey said, no, I just want out of Orthodoxy. So even though they continue to view themselves as being Jewish and the community is important, and a lot of them keep kosher, and some are Shomer Shabbos in different extents, they don't consider themselves. That's still a minority. So, but it may well be. It may well be.
How many surveys do you do a year?
I do in a year. I've done 14 broad communal surveys in 7 years. I'm doing 2 big surveys a year, and I do usually another 3 or so smaller surveys. I'm doing a survey now for a shul. I just did a survey for a very large modern Orthodox high school. So I do surveys, but I really get a lot of enjoyment from the communal surveys.
And you charge them for it, or you just do it as a labor of love?
What I charge is anywhere between, my price range is from 0 to ridiculously low. But
so who funds your research then?
A lot of it I fund myself. Of the 14 communal studies that I've done, a majority of them it's work. Most of it is, I do have to pay a few $1,000s a year for the website and for the polling platform, but the rest of it is just hours and hours and hours of my work, which I enjoy doing. So I view this as both a retirement project and a labor of love for the community. So I'm just trying to give something back to the community, and I'm enjoying it.
Mark, I want to thank you for joining us. So Mark Trencher is the founder of Nishma Research, which conducts research in the Orthodox Jewish community. Fascinating discussions that we had tonight and a lot of reactions. So thank you. And looking forward to your future surveys and hope you'll come back. And then maybe some of the topics we addressed tonight could be the subject of some future research as well.
Thank you, Zev. I'd love visiting with you, and I'd love to come back. And Shavua Tov. Good luck.
And give out your email or give out your website where people can participate.
The website is nishmaresearch.com, NISHMA research.com. Nishma means we listen in Hebrew. And you can email me at Mark, MARK, @nishmaresearch.com.
I thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
In a little while, we'll speak to Dov Lippin in Israel, former member of Knesset, and among the things we'll be